Hey everybody, welcome to this dance photography roundtable hosted by Sigma. And my name is Nick. I'm from Sigma Corporation's marketing department. And I've brought three of our friends along with us today to discuss dance photography. We're going to have a dance photography roundtable, something we haven't tried before, but we're going to try today. And hopefully it's a nice discussion and we can learn a lot today. So I'd like to introduce right now our friends Judy Host, hailing from the Atlanta, Georgia area. We also have Heather Larkin, who is right outside of the Atlanta area in Athens, just east of Atlanta. Marla Michele, and she is from the Detroit metro area. And welcome everybody to the stream.
Hi.
Hi.
So Judy, if you want to introduce yourself, if there's anything that I didn't cover, please feel free to jump in a little bit, and then we'll start sharing our images. We want to have everybody share their three favorite dance photography images, and we can talk about how they've been created and what gear they used and all kinds of things. So hopefully we can learn a lot today.
Okay, great. I'm a portrait photographer with a passion for ballet. So I've been shooting professionally probably, I don't know, over 30 years. So ballet is something that I have recently in the last 6 or 7 years taken on as a personal project and a passion, and then as a business. And I love it. I love what I do. So let's get started with images.
Very good. Let me just pass that over to Heather first. Heather, if you want to just talk a little bit about yourself and what you do and how dance photography is important to you.
Hey, I'm Heather Larkin, and I am choreography in Athens, Georgia. And I've been a portrait photographer for the last 17 years, but just getting into dance photography for the last 2. And I really enjoy it because it's something completely different from what I have been shooting normally. And since I'm not a dancer, it's really difficult for me. So I like the challenge.
I think I'm sensing a theme here where we have established portrait photographers who are finding ballet and dance as another way of expressing their creativity. So Marla, how does that apply to you? And welcome, of course, and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Marla Michele. I'm from the Metro Detroit area, and I used to be a dancer years ago. I studied ballet for years, and I studied at the Larkin School. And I'm a portrait photographer. Combining dance and photography is just an absolute dream that I'm so passionate about. I like to bring dancers to unique, interesting environments. And yeah, so I'm excited to share my 3 favorite images at the moment.
Very good. All right, so Judy, why don't we start with you? We have 3 different styles here, at least as far as the work that I've seen. The age ranges seem to vary pretty much. I know, Heather, you work with a lot of smaller children. Judy, you have more experienced dancers, and I think Marla, a lot of your dancers are sort of in between, people who are just getting into it as either a career or as a passion. So this will be interesting to see. And of course, myself, I'm not a dance photographer. I have no experience in ballet, so I'm going to learn a lot here as well. So Judy, why don't you kick us off with one of your favorite images?
So this is Keith. Keith is a principal dancer in the Atlanta Ballet Group, and I do a lot of I photograph a lot of their dancers. This has always been one of my favorite images. It's also one of the first ones that I did. Keith is a wonderful, graceful, amazing 6'3" dancer. And so when I first started, I had to learn about angles and light and how to emphasize these gorgeous bodies. And so this was actually created at imaging in the booth, in the Sigma booth, and it's shot 50 millimeter. And of course, I'm down shooting up, which is always going to be my favorite angle to elongate them. With Keith, we have a very large main light, which is what he's facing. And then we also have a light above him to separate him from the background, but also to have that light falling on him so that it creates a lot of shadows to emphasize the muscle tone. which is really what I'm after, as well as, you know, beautiful positions, beautiful hands, beautiful feet. But the expression when I work with these dancers, it all seems to work so beautifully together. And I wanted to show images with lighting because I know a lot of photographers that are starting to photograph dancers don't really understand, one, the positions, and two, how important the lighting is. So my style is very plain and basic and very simple in this image, very graceful, and I've got, you know, it's a very low key image.
I noticed here that, like you mentioned, the muscle tone and the actual body of the dancer seems to be really important in this image, almost to the point where he could be some kind of a Renaissance statue.
Yeah, really.
So obviously the lighting has a lot to do with that, but what about your shutter speed or your aperture? I mean, you're probably working at, I'm going to say 5.6 f8, somewhere in that range, so that you can get his entire body in sharp focus. Is that what we're looking at here?
Well, yes, and good point, Nick. When you know, normally when I'm photographing, I like to shoot with my aperture wide open, but when I do dancers, not so much. So it's probably more like 8 to 11,
okay.
Because I have the lights. My shutter is probably, I'm going to say 250, maybe 300. If I remember correctly, these were Westcott lights, so they're constant lights. When I use strobes, it's completely different. But because I have a lot of light, I can you know, bump up my settings so that they can be exactly what I want. I want him sharp from head to toe. So yes, absolutely. That I'm sure my aperture is about 11 or 8. And when you go on to the next person, I'll check my metadata for you.
Now, I would imagine that a lot of people aren't lucky enough to have, you know, big, powerful Westcott continuous lights at their disposal. Is this something that you could achieve with strobes, do you think?
I would prefer strobes to constant light any day.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, the strobes, the Profoto strobes that I use are much stronger. It's a much prettier light, and strobes stop the action. So I don't have to, you know, my shutter's probably 160. My ISO is probably 125, and my aperture is 8 to 11. And, you know, it's always that way. So I prefer strobes to constant lights any day. It's just in this case, because of where this was created, that we were using the constant lights.
And I think black and white also works really well for this shot.
Powerful, yeah. And I mean, if you look at his body and his arms, Keith is a very strong male dancer, and he lifts weights. And so his muscle tone is amazing. And he's flexible. So when you see the arch in his back, I mean, all of these things just add to, I think, to the gracefulness of the whole image.
Looks very effortless.
Judy, I have to say that I think this is one of my absolute favorite images of yours, and it always has been. The lighting in this, you accentuate his muscle tones perfectly, but you still manage to convey the sense of movement and dance with it. And I just love this image.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. It gives me goosebumps. When we're able to capture a dancer in the height of their passion, like we are when we're photographing in the height of our passion, it's just, the synergy is amazing. Thank you, Heather.
Judy, I just feel, looking at this image, the motion from his fingertips to his toes, and the beautiful light just falling on the expression right under his eye. I mean, it's really compelling. It's very beautiful. Yeah.
What's so interesting, and because now I know that you were a dancer, he's only been dancing for 6 years.
Really? Oh,
yeah. Wow. He's just a natural.
He definitely is a natural.
It's such a joy to work with him because of that. And he's effortless, just as you said. It's a good word for him.
I mean, to me, most impressive of all is that this was shot at a trade show booth.
I know, really.
Right.
So, you know, like a signature image of yours is just done on the fly in a location that you wouldn't expect. So
I know.
wonderful.
Yeah. When you work with professionals, though, I would say 9 times out of 10, that's what happens.
So, Heather, a lot of your subjects are not professionals yet. A lot of them are younger. Do you have some images that you can share with us that might be kids who are just getting into dance photography?
I definitely do. So this one is one of my first ones, or one of my most recent ones, rather. This was actually shot 2 weeks ago while we were social distancing. But this little girl just celebrated her 14th birthday.
Wow.
And she is working on being a professional dancer. So she's pre-pro, which means that she is pretty much homeschooling and dancing 8 hours a day.
Whoa.
And
Wow.
she told her mom, she's like, I am starting my career now. I know it's what I want to do, and this is the way it's going. So we went out to get her out of her house. She hasn't been to the dance studio in 2 months, and she just needed to be out and celebrate her 14th birthday. So we went out and took pictures at the local botanical garden and created this beautiful, lovely image. I very much enjoy this one. This is all natural light with the Sigma 105 1.4 art lens.
Mm-hmm.
And she is very flexible, as you can see.
Can't even imagine.
We actually had to work hard for this image to not get her to smack herself in the head with her shoe. And for those of you that know ballet shoes, they have wooden blocks in them. And so if you hit yourself in the head with them, it really hurts.
Oh my goodness.
I find the space between her head and the shoe quite dramatic, really, and the arch in her back. And I think, Heather, you did a beautiful job capturing the defining moment.
Thank you. Thank you. That has been definitely a work in progress for me since I'm not a dancer. I don't always know timing as well as it took me a while. How about that? And I think one of the defining moments for me was learning that if I see it in the camera viewfinder, I have missed it. You actually have to press the button so that you don't see it. And it's an odd thing where if you were looking through the viewfinder, you know you've gotten it right if you missed what you were shooting.
No, your lines in this are also beautiful. The light is beautiful, perfect time of day. Just to love the line leading in and out. And I even like, I don't know what you call these little things that are in the lower left-hand corner, but it's part of the architecture. It just adds to it. It's just, yeah, really beautiful use of light as well. When I'm doing this, it takes me a couple of tries. I half the time the legs not even close to the head. So it does take time to understand the timing and then showing them to make sure the position is correct. But you did a good job.
Thank you, Judy. I have to say it's really difficult because each dancer is different. Yes. Like you can get your timing with one dancer and think you have it, and then comes along somebody different who does it at a different speed, who does it at a different rate, and your personal timing is off again.
Yeah. The other part of this, though, too, Heather, is you've got the right. I think you have the right angle, and a lot of times when I'm teaching this to other students, it's important for them to understand what will be the best angle to capture this type of position. And you're spot on with it, you know, with where you are standing and or if you're down shooting up, it's just the perfect angle. So good job.
Thanks, Judy.
I'm proud of you.
All right.
Thank you, Heather. Marla, what have you got for us on your first go around? There we go.
There we are.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's gorgeous.
That is beautiful.
Thank you so much. So this dancer is Madeline, and she's actually with Ballet Detroit. However, she lives in Windsor, which is about 25-minute drive either through the tunnel or over the Ambassador Bridge, which you see behind her. So she is pre-professional. This was shot with the Sigma Art, can you see me? 24 to 35.
There it is.
Here it is. And I remember switching to this lens when we walked over to the bridge because I wanted to incorporate all the architectural elements of the bridge. I find it a little bit tricky to use a wide angle with dancers, but it's something that I'm playing around with a lot lately. I really like the drama of the bridge, and I found that the way that her hand is pointing up sort of makes my eye look up at the bridge, and the way her back leg is also pointing.
Yeah,
sort of
it's almost as if she's
way.
reaching for something. It's amazing how you've been able to marry, and this is something that I've seen a lot of your images, an urban environment and sort of the gracefulness of a dancer that you normally don't see together.
Thank you.
Yeah, I like the bridge. I like the lines of the bridge because what's happening for me, it's almost like she's pointing. You follow that line and the line takes you all the way down to the end of the bridge, and then the fencing kind of brings you back. And so it's a continuous.
It's a somewhat of a journey, isn't it?
It is.
Just like the bridge.
Excellent term too, journey, definitely. And your lighting, of course, is magnificent. It's beautiful, beautiful light. And you have a beautiful dancer with, something that's flowing. So it comes to life. It's not stagnant.
From a technical standpoint, Marla, you have obviously a beautiful golden hour backlight right behind her, and you can see that shining through the lace on her outfit. What are you doing to keep the front of her illuminated? Is it a small flash, a little bit of reflection, or is it just all natural and you're able to boost the shadows in Lightroom?
This is all natural lighting, and I don't use any additional outside light sources.
Easy.
In post-processing,
Mm-hmm.
I go into Photoshop and I lift the shadows off of her a little bit. And yeah, it's just a little bit of brightening her up, adding a little bit of light in post-processing.
Awesome.
All right, so Judy, what do you have to show us next? It looks like we've got someone in motion, jumping in the air, and this looks to be like it's done in a studio with a really, really big continuous backdrop. Is this done at home, or is this in a studio space?
No, this is in a very large studio with a continuous wall and no backdrop. That's part of the, I won't say issue, I'll say concern. When I have my dancers jumping in a studio, one, you need a very tall ceiling for obvious reasons. But whatever they're on needs to be, and when they land, needs to be really thought through. So I don't use canvases. I don't use backdrops at all.
Okay.
This is all textures and graphics that I've added to a very ugly gray wall.
Ah, okay.
So she can fly, which she is. I've got a huge softbox, and these are strobes. I have a huge softbox, which is actually a Westcott light, believe it or not. And then I have two Profoto lights, one up above her with a beauty dish, which is facing straight down. And then there's a light to her, would be her left, all to create that beautiful rim light that you see that's on her arm, and also her hair, because again, that separates her from the background. And then she's illuminated by that large softbox. And these are strobes. These are set up as strobes so that when she jumps, it stops the action. And so I can tell you exactly what my settings are. My ISO is at 125 or 160. I'm a Canon shooter. That seems to be their sweet spot. My f-stops are probably 11 to 16. And then my shutter speed's probably 125. Because again, the strobes will stop the movement. So it's just a combination of what kind of light that you want, how close she is to the light, and actually that light is, right at the edge of that picture. And you know, I have to teach my dancers where the light source is coming from, that is the direction that I want them to face in, so that they know. And then I'm belly down to the ground. And this is most likely the 50. It's either the 50 or the 40. I fell in love with the Sigma 50 millimeter lens when it first came out. And then I started shooting with the 40. So I go back and forth between those two when I'm in the studio, because my sensibility is to give them a lot of space.
So when you're framing a shot like this, are you having the dancer start a little bit off screen and move into the shot, and you've already got it manually focused where you need it to be? Or are you following them? I mean, what is your typical method when you're capturing a shot like this? Because obviously she's coming from one direction and you've got it dead on in the center.
I'll have her do it first, so that I know where she's going to end up. And then I anticipate. I don't shoot manual focus ever. So it's on automatic, but I know exactly where that head's going to be. And so I'm aiming to her face.
Okay.
And I use a single point of reference when I'm shooting this way.
Judy, I love the dreaminess of the fabric.
Thank you.
The tension in her neck, as a contrast. I mean, you can feel the motion. It's just the fingers again. You're really great at capturing hands and fingers, and
you know, this is part of what, and maybe you feel the same way, I don't know, but part of what drew me to this sport or dance is that these folks are naturally graceful. I mean, their hands are always perfection, and their expression, because they're trained to do that. So I feel like our job is to capture them as beautifully as we possibly can. So that's why the lighting comes into play.
Sure.
Do you ever have a situation where you've gotten everything else right, and the only thing that's missing is the hand position, and you find yourself having to composite with another photograph just so that you can get that hand in there?
I will tell you that I would do that, but I haven't had to.
Okay.
But
because you're working with professionals usually, and they're able to nail that position.
Yeah. So if the position is bad, that's on me. It's
Right.
really not them. But if I had to do a hand swap, I'd do it.
I find that my dancers are usually so self-critical at the reveal sessions that they will let me know, no, the foot's not exactly right, the hand's not. So they'll let you know.
Yeah, absolutely, they will. And after I shoot, now Keith is working with me in the studio. So he's standing behind me when she flies, and he'll say, now. So he's kind of my choreographer director.
Great.
So obviously what we have here in our background and the overall feel of this is a very minimalistic kind of setting. Heather's next image, if I recall correctly, has a very elaborate background. So why don't we switch over to that and we can take a look at how that was accomplished.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. So we have a very big arch and obviously a nice grand setting. So what made you choose this location, and what do you feel it brings to the overall scene?
So I love this building. This building is on our university campus, and it is probably around 200 years old. It has been here almost longer than the city has. And I just love arches, not only for, in terms of architecture, but the leading lines. This image, I mean, you can see it. It leads your eye straight up and straight back down to her.
It sure does.
So I shot this with the Sigma 20mm 1.4 art lens, which is my new favorite lens for dancers because it allows me to create these like overblown huge arches out of the architecture here.
Oh, I need to try that lens.
I love it. I really do.
20 millimeter.
Yeah, it gets awfully wide, awfully fast. And I found that if I'm not completely dead center, then I'll end up with kind of like some wonky lines on the sides. So I have to watch that. But other than that, it's perfect.
I love the contrast that you've created here with her in the color. You know, red is a color that, as a portrait photographer, I always hated. But now that I'm doing dancers, I love it because it pops.
It does. And she is one of those rare people who actually does look good in like complete red. And so for this image, I definitely wanted to create a sense of movement. So I had her take her hair down, and I wanted her to be tossing the dress. And so this shot actually took quite a number of tries to get right. Because again, she's also, at the time of this image was taken, she was 14. And so tossing the dress at the same time as tossing her hair, at the same time as getting her feet and hands right, and the arch in her back, it was a lot to keep track of.
And the movement in the fabric.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And the fingers
Yeah.
are beautiful.
Yeah, I love the fabric. For me, it brings it to life. Sometimes some of these positions are a little too staid for me, so I use fabric to show movement. Even though we stop the movement, it's just, yeah, it just brings it to life. It's beautiful. I just really love that way she pops out of there. I mean, you look at the image and you go right to her, and I see the architecture, but I don't, you know, my eye is really just focused right on her.
The architecture does a wonderful job of framing her. I mean, it's obvious by looking at this picture that what the subject is, what the important part is. It's not the arch. As much as that does bring to the photo, it is her. It's the color of the dress. It's the movement. It's everything about what is occurring underneath that arch. And it's just a beautiful shot.
The arch gives her a sense of being larger than life, really.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Marla.
All right.
Let's go on to your second image here.
Let's see. Can you see
Okay.
now?
Oh, I love this image.
Okay, so very different from the bridge location. This is obviously not in the in Detroit proper. This is a little bit outside of the confines of the city, but obviously a wonderful image shot at a very high shutter speed at a perfect time of day. Wonderful colors and tones here. Marla, tell us more.
So this dancer is Chrissy, and she's actually a dance teacher in the Milford, Michigan area. We are at the beach, this little beach that I love. It's always very quiet. We have many lakes here in the Great Lakes State, and this is just one of the this is Kent Lake. We're at the golden hour, and she showed up with some great fabrics. Judy, we were just talking about fabrics, right?
Absolutely.
And she came in, and I was about knee deep in the water, and so was she. And then we decided we wanted some movement and some splash and some water droplets. And her hair, her hair is going, and
Yeah,
the toe, that's what I love the most, is that
Oh.
feeling of that foot pointing. I can just feel it in my own foot.
It's those tiny little details that you guys keep mentioning, the hands and the feet and the muscle tone and things like that. How important is that for the end product, for the dancers who are looking at this, for the end use applications? I mean, obviously the overall lighting, but the form is really what's the most important thing, right?
When they come into my studio and they're looking at their images on the big screen, we do a slideshow presentation. I watch them in a millisecond. They know which ones are the right images. If there's something off, next, that's it. I mean, the ones that are the compelling images to them have the perfect hand, the perfect foot, they're very self-scrutinizing.
It's the shots where they were able to perfect their discipline that really stand out to them.
Yeah,
Right.
perfectly said, by the way, Nick. That's exactly correct. And
Yes.
even though we may look at it and think it's gorgeous because everything's working, they look at it and go, no.
I don't
Right.
like my foot. I don't like my leg. I mean, they're
Right.
very, right. I mean, I would never dare post anything on social media without first checking with my dancers to
Right,
make sure
exactly.
this one okay for you. And
I
It's
think that's
probably a similar situation that you faced as portrait photographers, right? You may have an image that you think is perfect and the lighting is right and everything about it is working for you, but if just one part of it is off in the way that they look, then it's not even a question. It's not even a consideration. That one gets thrown out, no matter how much the photographer thinks it's perfect.
Well, it depends on usage also, but yes,
Okay.
I mean, if you're in this business to make money and you want to make a sale, then it's up to them.
Right.
right.
And I think that's one of the most interesting parts about being a dance photographer is that not only are we working our art, but they're working theirs. It's a collaboration of sorts, because if one of the two of us doesn't get it right, then you might as well just throw it out. It's done.
Hmm.
Yeah, timing is everything.
Exactly.
Perfect timing on this one. If you had waited just a little bit longer and she started to come down, you'd have all that background running right through her head. So
Right. Right.
it's
Right.
perfect with the splash and yeah, beautiful shot. Beautiful shot.
Thank you.
Good job.
All right, Judy, what have you got next for us?
So this is more of one of my tame shots. But in this, I was teaching a workshop and I was trying to explain to my students the importance of telling a story with your dancers. So one of the things that you learn when you work with dancers, especially ballet dancers, is that they can only be on their feet for so long. And then they get fatigued. And so you have to give them a break. And so what we were doing was coming up with positions so we could continue to photograph without stressing Anna's feet. Anna is a principal dancer for the American Ballet Company in California and also in San Diego. And we'd been working with her probably for about 2 hours. And so we had beautiful light. We had this great location. Her outfit matched the door. Everything was just perfect. And so we were creating more what I would call static positions that allowed her to come up and down. So even though it looks like, she's very comfortable in this position, she's up, we shoot, she comes down. And so these are some of the things that I find myself having to remind people when we do these types of shoots that they need to be aware of. And dancers, the other part of it too, is that dancers are used to moving. They're not used to posing. And so, when we're doing a setup like this, she actually is posing. So we're telling a story. And in Anna's mind, as she's there, she's thinking of something, a storyline of a recital that she's doing. And so that's what's going through her mind so that she knows what to do with her hands and then also her expression.
I would imagine that most of the time when dancers come into a shoot that they're expecting that action shots are going to be the bread and butter of the shoot and what they're looking for at the end. How often do you find that dancers respond positively to images like this and end up saying, actually, these are one of my favorites when I wasn't on point or I wasn't leaping through the air, that this is something that appeals to them the most?
That's an interesting question. My experience, I think, I talk to them before I photograph them and I ask them what they need, what they want, what they're looking for so that I can hopefully give that to them as well. Most of them don't have these types of, and I would call this a portrait.
Right.
They have, people are always photographing them as they're dancing at an event, if they're performing in a theater and so forth. So the more commercial side or fashion side or lifestyle side or whatever, however you want to categorize this, is not something that they normally have. And so I want very much to be able to give that to them. And personally, it's my preference as well.
And this is a very natural looking photo as well. It doesn't have a distorted perspective. This is just dead on. It's something that you could, I mean, you wouldn't normally see dancers posed in a doorway, but you could imagine it happening in real life, the way that it's framed and the way that
This is the 40.
I was
right.
going to say,
So
is
a
it
very
40
natural.
or 50?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 50, those are my two favorite ballet lenses. I mean, I shoot other lenses in different perspectives, but the first lens that I pick up when I pack my bag, when I know I'm going to photograph, is either the 50 or the 40. That's always with me.
And this is another shot, much like the one we saw from Heather before, where the architecture frames the dancer very nicely and doesn't do any distracting. So it's able to put the focus on the subject in the middle and gives it a little bit more extra depth. Even though it's a pretty flat area, you've got the stairs there that lead into her and the door that is a little bit further away from her to give it a little bit of extra depth that you wouldn't have if you had just shot this against a blank wall or a backdrop.
I think both the stairs and the door have lovely texture.
That too.
Really adds a beautiful layer, lovely element.
Very nice.
I
All
can't
right.
take my eyeballs off of her foot. Look at that. Her turnout is stunning. Like, she's got that nailed.
Yeah, and you know, you have to, these are the little things that I learned as you know, the longer that I photograph dancers and learn to appreciate their leg that way, because God knows I can't.
Now, when people are first getting into dance or ballet photography, I'm sure they start small, photographing their own children or people that they know. But as they get a little bit more experienced, how important is it for them to know all the technical jargon, you know, the dance terms, which you don't start off knowing? But do you have to think like a dancer? Do you have to appreciate and understand their craft before you can really make it work from a photographer's perspective?
You know, I'll tell you from my perspective, I think it's a great question for everybody. I call it fine art photography. I don't do events. I don't do recitals. I don't do a volume dance business. That's not at all what I'm trying to create. I'm trying to create art. I'm trying to create wall portraits.
Right.
So for me, I'm not a dancer, never have been, don't know the terms, but you know, after 6-7 years of doing this, I have a pretty good eye of what is the right position and what I think that they're going to like. And 9 times out of 10, they do. But in the beginning, I didn't know anything. And I would show them pictures. I storyboard most of my sessions. So I can see what it should look like. And that was very helpful.
Marla, as a dancer yourself, is it helpful to have a photographer who knows what it's like to be a dancer or knows that world and can help direct you or can help take some of the burden off your shoulders? Because obviously as the dancer, there's certain things that you want to do. Do you want to be able to have a photographer working with you who you don't have to explain those things to, who already knows?
I mean, I think it does, it's not mandatory, but
No.
I do feel like it does offer a nice symbiotic relationship to be able to have a sense and a feel of that movement and to familiarize yourself with technique and terms, arabesque, plie, poses, turnout. These are things, though, knowledge that you can definitely acquire. Dancers, all of my dancers have been very helpful in this regard. I've had dancers come in for their reveal sessions and give me pointers. This is a better way that I'd like to see my foot, and so I do think that I think it's helpful. I think the knowledge is helpful to have.
All right, so moving from this, which has lots of texture in the background, we'll move on to Heather's next photo, which is 100% minimalistic. It is on a black backdrop with very simple lighting, but the movement captured there is great. So Heather, if you would please share that one with us.
There we go. So this is Henry, and Henry is 13 in this photo, and he is also pre-pro, which means that he is beginning his dance career at 13 years old.
Yeah.
And I find with the younger kids that are pro or pre-pro or not yet pro or pre-pro, they're very concerned with not only how they look, but how the final image feels. They want to look cool, but they also want to look older and more professional than they are, but that is their main concern. And so for me, this image was taken right as I was beginning my dance career as a photographer. And one of the things that we were just talking about was how important it is to be able to know the terminology. And that's one of the things that I ran into with this image, is that at the time that I took this, I did not know dance terminology. And we really struggled with this session because I didn't know what to tell him to do. You know, they train so hard, and I couldn't tell him vocabulary wise what I needed to do. And so this session was a nice culmination of his art kind of overtaking my inexpertise at the time. I knew what I wanted lighting wise, but I didn't know what to tell him. And so it was a real struggle. And so after this session, I actually went back to YouTube, looked up all kinds of, I had dance flashcards. Like, I actually wrote myself the terms on flashcards. And I went and signed up for a dance class so that I would know more about it, more about what it was like. And it's definitely helped me quite a bit. But this image still remains one of my very favorites. I think because it was so frustrating, and we still ended up with this.
What kind of lighting setup are you working with here, Heather? Is this, it looks to me like a large strobe on the left side and then a smaller or a rim light on the other side. Was this shot with strobes, or was this continuous?
Yep, you nailed it. So this is a 8-foot softbox on as the main on the left front, and then a strip light on the back right. And these are this was Palsy buffs at the time, but I've switched to Godox lights now. And then this was shot with the Sigma 70mm macro 2.8 art lens.
Really?
It was almost too long for the studio space I was in. I was crammed backwards up against the wall. And if I had the 40 at the time, I would have used that.
Now, as far as the background is concerned, sometimes you can have a little bit of light spill into the background, and you'll have textures that you don't want to be there, because obviously you wanted to have a completely black background. What did you do here to keep that from spilling over? Was it just using a directional softbox and a strip light, like you said, to make sure that it doesn't spill over, or did you do any post-processing here?
This was actually pulling him off the drop so that the light did not reach it. The strobe that I was using, the softbox, is humongous, and so it does spill quite a bit. And so all I wanted to do, the backdrop here is just black felt, and all I wanted to do was pull him forward enough that the drop was black and not gray.
Great job. And one thing that we've seen here that was in another image earlier is the choice to go with black and white. Is it something that this is going to be, and I guess this question applies to any genre of photography, but was this an aesthetic choice, or was it just something you said, the color is not just right, I'm going to put it in black and white? Or what was the decision to go with black and white here? Maybe just because it's a monochromatic scene altogether?
I actually chose black and white for this image for two reasons. One, because I felt like it felt better in black and white.
Mm-hmm.
The flying, to me, the color did not help tell that story at all.
Right.
And so it felt better in black and white. But also, his ballet tights, the black of the tights did not match the black of the shirt because his skin shows through them. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was two different colors of black, and that drives me a little bit crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except for with this image, it really works for you because it creates a separation from the background. So you've got three different blacks, but without that lighter part, or maybe it's the way that you've lit it, there's some separation, so I can see his legs. Does that make sense?
It does.
I can see, not so much the texture of his shirt, but I can still see how the light is spilling on it, and it creates a nice effect. I don't think that the color version would have been as exciting as I think the black and white is. It was a good choice on your part to go black and white.
Thanks, Judy.
Great. And Marla, I believe you have one more for us.
So this was an interesting day. It was Grand Rapids, Michigan in January. It was about 22 degrees.
I was about to say, I saw the snow on the side and I immediately felt bad for her.
We were freezing. She was such a trooper. This is Megan. She's 13 years old and pre-professional in Grand Rapids. What I was going for here is something very different for me. I tend to really normally shy away from centering my subjects, but I felt that this composition, I was pushing myself. I wanted to do something where she was right smack in the center of the bridge, but I feel like another component of this that I found interesting is the blue color harmony was something I was playing with, but also trying to lift some of that blue out of the shadows of the snow became interesting. And then having some dreamy light coming out through the top. And this is called the Blue Bridge, actually, in Grand Rapids. We call it the Blue Bridge.
Now this looks like one of your 105 shots, perhaps?
My 105, yes, exactly.
Yeah, the background here just melts away, which is a good thing because midwinter streets can probably be pretty nasty looking. But because of the subject you have here and because you've been able to fade that background away into almost nothingness, you don't get any of that sense. You really get the beauty of the symmetry of the bridge, and the color of the bridge does a really nice job in not offsetting, but complementing her dress as well. Yeah,
no, I like the center. It works for me that way, especially with that line, that nice leading line that leads you back. Mm-hmm. It's just, she's just beautifully framed in there, and I love her position rather than have that leg bent into her head. I like that it's out, and I love the way that her skirt and that fabric is falling there so naturally. It's beautiful, beautiful light. I love your usage of light. It's really amazing.
Thank you.
And it's, as you mentioned earlier, it's that softness. There's a dreaminess to it. And even though she's so sharp and the fabric is sharp, it's just, that 105 is a beautiful lens.
Yeah, this 105.
Yep, I know, the beast.
That's what I have on my camera right now.
The beast, right?
Bench press the thing.
Yep. It is a beast, but it's so worth it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that we've seen a lot here is stopping motion, whether it's in natural light or whether it's use of strobes. But Judy, I've heard you talk in the past about possibly going with slower shutter speeds deliberately as a way of showing motion. Do you have anything that you could share with us that might show that effect?
I do, but I'd have to go get it.
Oh, okay.
So if you guys want to just talk amongst yourselves, I'll go get it.
Okay.
Oh, you know what? I do have one thing that I can talk about. It's definitely not freezing motion, but I have one, a pair of kids that showed up in cow costumes because they thought it would be funny to prank me.
Okay.
And I made them shoot in the cow costumes. And it happens to be one of my favorite images.
Show it. Let's take a look. What
Hang
the
on,
heck?
I'm gonna open up both of them and pick one. And like I said, they thought they were going to prank me and showed up in these. And I made them shoot in them. And it's just hysterical.
That is horrible.
Look at the udders.
Oh, that's my favorite part is these little like udders sticking out.
That's great.
And meanwhile, they'll look at these final images and be like, "Oh, my form was off."
Right. So they nailed these.
They completely forget about the udders and the cow outfits, but
yeah. No,
Wow.
they thought they were great. I mean, these kids are 12, 11 and 12. And
Yeah.
so they did a great job with this. But yeah, this was a hot, sweaty day and they showed up in this mess.
Huge. Are they pajamas? What are they?
They're pajamas, yes.
Very cute.
Well, I have one thing really quick to show you also. Let's see. Wow.
well, that's a messy desktop right there.
Woo, Marla.
It's really very organized for being.
Oh my goodness. So this was the time that I was with this dancer in downtown Detroit shooting in Greektown area. And let's see if it'll pull up. We stopped for a drink.
Oh, beautiful.
My
Love
goodness.
it.
At the bar, and
Yep.
then we got inspired and she hopped up there.
Nice.
So that was a fun moment.
That's super
Very
fun.
cool. Yes.
So, Judy, we were talking about using a slower shutter speed as a way of expressing motion as opposed to stopping motion using, whether you're using a fast shutter speed or using strobes. So do you have something to share with us?
I do. These are hard to do because, you know, my shutter speed's probably 10 or 8.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to obviously adjust all your other settings so you have a good exposure. But what's difficult is the face, because sometimes you get multiple heads. And so she's moving, she's actually turning. And I do a lot of these because I like them, which is why I do them. And not a lot of people do them. So it takes a while. I probably will shoot 20 of them before I get the one that I want.
Mm-hmm.
But just drag the shutter. That's really all that is.
Mm.
And again, remember my business model is about art. I take these images and then I pour hot wax on them and I melt it back down and add color and, you know, do all sorts of strange things to them. So the output is meant to be, you know, different. And in some cases, you know, it's better when you can't really recognize a face. A little more anonymous that way. So I do a lot of soft images.
And less about nailing some kind of technical masterpiece that a lot of that you can see from lots of different photographers. It's more about putting your own stamp on an image and creating a real sense of the movement and the color. And those are the things that are most important in this image, rather than making sure you've got every hair tack sharp, which a lot of people can accomplish with the right equipment. But you're able to put something on it that no one else can do. This is much more personal to you.
It is. And, you know, we all have our own style. We all see things differently and interpret things differently and style the image differently. And we use light differently and our equipment is different, and it goes on and on and on and on. And those are all choices that we make.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's always been about, there's so many wonderful photographers out there. How can I get noticed? How can I be a little bit different? So I do a lot of these, and they're fun. They're fun to do. But again, sometimes you get those scary heads. So you have to be
I
careful.
would not have guessed that your shutter speed was as slow as you said. I would have guessed something much faster. But I really enjoy the sense of movement in this. You can see the skirt, you can see her musculature, but you can also see her moving.
Yeah. It's an interesting thing to do, for sure.
And this is something that you would just shoot with natural lighting. I mean, there's no
Oh no,
strobe trickery here, or is there?
no, I do it in the studio. Shooting slow shutter, dragging the shutter with strobes is a trip. It's a lot of fun because you don't know what you're going to get.
Hmm.
And so the camera moves also. It isn't just them that's moving, but I'm moving too. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
And I imagine it takes a lot of practice as well to sort of figure out what your style is and the movements that you need to make to achieve what you want.
I think too, I mean, that's also true, Nick. I think also it's knowing what you want. It's
Right.
recognizing, okay, this is it. This is the one that I've been working so hard to get. And I'm good with one. I'm not really looking for a lot of them. I just, from every session that I do, whether it's for a client or myself or a project or whatever, I'm looking for the one money shot. That's it.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Judy, for sharing this image and the other images that you shared with us today as well. And Heather, of course, thank you for your images. And Marla, thank you so much for sharing yours. And I just want to share some of your social handles with our viewers today. Judy, you can be found at judy.host on Instagram. And I believe you have a website, which is just your name, yes? judyhost.com.
Yes.
Heather, yours is at Fairyography, so she's pretty easy to find if you head over to Instagram. And what is your website? Remind me.
Fairyography.com.
Oh, I should have known that. And Marla, you have a little bit of a longer Instagram handle. It is Enchanted Photography Michigan on Instagram, and I believe something along those lines for your website.
Enchanted by Marla Michele.
Enchanted by marlamichele.com. So make sure that you check out Judy, Heather, and Marla for their full portfolios and what services they can provide in their areas. Of course, Judy and Heather are in the Atlanta area, and Marla is in the Detroit area. And hopefully soon we'll be out of the woods of this whole COVID mess, and we can all start getting back to work.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that's something that not only you guys, but all of the dancers that you work with are really eager to get back to. Not only getting photographed, but just being with the rest of their friends and their coworkers. I guess you would call them coworkers, teammates.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in the community. I don't really know.
It's okay.
But thank you all so much for joining me today. And we look forward to doing something like this again. I think it went pretty well.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. And Marla, it was nice to meet you. Heather, I've met before.
And say hi to Eddie. I can see him running upstairs. In the
Yeah, we're like, hey.
I
all
don't.
right,
Oh, there he is.
Hi.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. And until next time, find us at sigmaphoto.com and right here on Sigma Facebook and on our Instagram profile at Sigma Photo. Bye, everybody.
Okay, bye. Bye-bye.